Detroit. Early 1962, the air smells like gasoline, hot oil, and fear. Not from the public, not from the fans, from the engineers. Because somewhere inside Ford's racing division, a brutal new engine had just come to life. And the rest of Detroit knew it. Chevy knew it. Chrysler definitely knew it. But what almost nobody knows is just how close this engine came to tearing NASCAR apart, and how it forced every rival to rethink everything they thought they knew about power. You think you know the story of Ford's big blocks? Not like this, because before the legendary 427 dominated headlines, there was the 406, and for a brief, violent moment, it was the engine everyone was afraid of. Corey? To understand why the 406 high performance mattered, you have to go back to a time when horsepower wasn't just marketing, it was war. The early 1960s, NASCAR was exploding. Stock car racing had become a proving ground where manufacturers fought for dominance in front of millions. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. That wasn't a slogan, it was survival. Every weekend, dealerships across America watched the races, not for entertainment, for ammunition. Because on Monday morning, when customers walked through those doors, the first thing they'd ask was simple: who won? And if your brand wasn't on that list, you'd better have a damn good excuse, or a sale price ready. This was the era when racing actually mattered to the bottom line. When victories translated directly into showroom traffic, when a single win at Daytona could move thousands of units nationwide, the stakes were massive, and everyone knew it. Chevrolet had the 409. You've heard the song. She's real fine, my 409. That engine was legendary before it even proved itself. Marketing genius combined with legitimate performance. It was making serious power, and more importantly, it was winning races. Chrysler was pushing its Max Wedge program. Big, angry, purpose-built race engines that didn't pretend to be anything else. They were heavy-handed, brutal, and devastatingly effective when they held together. Both were fast, both were dangerous, both were taking wins away from Ford. Ford? They had something good, but not good enough. Their FE engine family, introduced in the late 1950s, was solid, reliable. The kind of engine you could trust for 100,000 miles of daily driving. It powered trucks, family sedans, police interceptors. It was everywhere. But reliability doesn't win races. Speed does. And Ford needed more of it. Fast. The corporate pressure was mounting. Henry Ford II himself was watching the racing results with growing frustration. Ford had dominated in earlier eras. They'd built the flathead V8 that powered hot rods across America. They had racing in their DNA. But now they were getting embarrassed every Sunday. That wasn't acceptable. So their engineers took a hard look at what they had. And then they made a decision that would change everything. They were going to push the FE platform to its absolute limit, not a conservative evolution, not a safe upgrade. They were going to find out exactly how much power that block could handle before it gave up, and that's how the 406 was born. On paper, the 406 high performance doesn't look insane. It used a 4.13-inch bore and a 3.78-inch stroke, giving it a total displacement of 406 cubic inches. Simple math, basic geometry. But the way they extracted power from that setup, that's where things got serious. Compression ratios climbed as high as 11.41 in high-performance versions. That was aggressive, especially for an engine that still had to survive long races. We're talking about fuel quality from 1962 here. Premium pump gas. Nothing like the octane boosters and race fuels that would come later. Running that kind of compression meant walking a razor's edge between maximum power and catastrophic detonation. 1 degree too much timing? Engine damage. Fuel quality drops mid-race? Disaster. But that's what it took to compete. With a single 4-barrel carburetor, it made around 385 horsepower. Respectable. Solid. Good enough for the street. But nobody cared about the base version. The real monster was the tri-power setup. 3 Holley 2-barrel carburetors sitting on top. Massive airflow. Raw fuel delivery. The center carb handled normal driving and light throttle. But when you buried your foot, when you really demanded everything that engine had, the outboard carbs opened up, and all hell broke loose. In that configuration, the 406 was officially rated at 405 horsepower. Unofficially, more like 430, maybe even 450 in race trim. And torque? Around 448 lb-ft, enough to twist drive shafts and shred tires at will. But here's the thing most people don't realize. It wasn't just about power. It was about how that power was delivered. The 406 came alive in the mid-range. It pulled hard, relentlessly, from around 3,000 RPM all the way past 6,000. For a big block in 1962, that was savage. Most engines of that era made peak power and then fell flat on their face. The power curve looked like a mountain with a cliff on the backside. The 406 was different. It kept pulling, kept building, the kind of power delivery that gave drivers confidence because they knew the engine would respond anywhere in the rev range. And on NASCAR tracks, especially the superspeedways where you needed sustained power through long, sweeping turns, that kind of power curve was deadly. Coming off the banking at Daytona, rolling back into the throttle, feeling that engine pull from 4,000 RPM all the way to redline without hesitation, that's what won races. But there was a problem, a big one. Early in development, the 406 started showing signs of stress, not small issues, not the kind of thing you could band-aid and ignore, catastrophic ones. Engines were coming apart under sustained high RPM, bearings were overheating, oil pressure would drop suddenly. And then it was over. Crankshaft failure, rods knocking, total destruction. One mechanic reportedly said, "We pulled the pan and it looked like someone poured glitter in the oil. Metal shavings, everywhere, bearing material, fragments of the crank surface, sometimes pieces of connecting rod, the kind of carnage that makes even experienced engine builders wince." So what was happening? At high speeds, 6,000 RPM and beyond, the oiling system just couldn't keep up. The FE design fed oil to the top of the engine first, and then to the crankshaft. That's fine for street driving. Perfect, actually. The valve train gets lubrication. Everything stays quiet and smooth, and the crank gets what it needs because it's not under extreme stress. But in racing, when you're holding 6,000 RPM for 30 seconds at a time, when the engine is generating heat that would make a street engine shut down, that's a death sentence. Because the crank is what takes the abuse. It's spinning at insane speeds, fighting massive combustion forces with every rotation. It's the first thing that needs oil. Instead, it was getting whatever was left. And under full throttle, lap after lap, there wasn't much left. The oil was hot, thin, breaking down. And the bearings, they were running dry. So engines died, fast, and publicly. At major races, Ford engines would start strong, then fade, then fail. Drivers would radio in, oil pressures dropping. Crew chiefs would respond, "Back off, bring her home." But sometimes there wasn't time. Sometimes the engine just let go. Right there on national television, in front of millions of fans, in front of every Ford dealer in America watching and hoping for a win. Instead, they got smoke and failure. And every time it happened, Chevy and Chrysler got a little more confident. Their engineers smiled. Their marketing teams prepared victory ads. But Ford wasn't done, not even close. The engineers went back to the drawing board. They knew the problem. Now they needed a solution. And the fix they came up with? It was simple, brutal, and incredibly effective. They redesigned the oiling system. Instead of feeding oil from the top down, they improved the flow to prioritize the crankshaft. Stronger oil pumps, better passages, reinforced bearings, revised oil pan designs to prevent starvation during hard cornering. They studied every failure. Every seized bearing got torn apart and analyzed. What temperature did it reach? Where did the wear start? What could prevent it? It was methodical, scientific, but also desperate, because Ford was running out of time. Every race weekend without a competitive engine was another weekend losing ground to Chevy. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was enough. And once that issue was under control, the 406 became something else entirely. It became a weapon. By 1962, the 406 high performance was unleashed on NASCAR, and almost immediately, things changed. At tracks like Daytona and Charlotte, Ford teams started showing real speed, not just competitive, dominant in bursts. Qualifying sessions turned heads. Ford engines were suddenly sitting on pole positions. Cars that had struggled to make the top 10 were now fighting for the front row. Drivers loved it. One racer reportedly said, "When that third carb opened, it felt like the car got hit from behind." That's the kind of acceleration the 406 delivered. Not a gentle build, not a gradual increase. A punch, a shove, immediate violent thrust that pushed you back in the seat and made the front end go light. In qualifying runs, these engines were pushing stock-bodied cars to speeds over 150 mph on super speedways. That was unheard of for full-weight production-based vehicles. Quarter-mile times? Low 12 seconds. Some dipping into the high 11s with the right setup and a skilled driver. That was serious performance for full-weight cars in the early 60s. Street cars running those times were rare. Factory cars doing it? Almost non-existent. But racing isn't just about speed. It's about survival. And this is where the 406 walked a fine line. At the 1962 Daytona 500, Ford came in strong. The 406 engines were fast, competitive, dangerous. Teams had confidence. Drivers had hope. This was supposed to be Ford's comeback race. But endurance? Still questionable. Several cars experienced issues before the halfway mark. Oil temperature spikes, pressure fluctuations, minor failures that hinted at bigger problems lurking beneath the surface. Crew chiefs watched gauges like hawks. Every tick of the needle mattered. And then, the real nightmare started. A few engines let go completely. Smoke pouring out, oil on the track, races lost in seconds, drivers coasting to pit road with dead engines, mechanics pulling valve covers and seeing destruction, team owners watching their investments evaporate in clouds of blue smoke. You can probably guess what happened next. But the truth is even crazier. Instead of backing off, Ford pushed harder. They knew they were close, very close. The speed was there. The power was real. They just needed the engine to last, so they doubled down on development. Stronger bottom ends, better balancing, improved cooling. Every weak point was attacked. Every failure became a lesson. They brought in metallurgists to analyze bearing failures. They consulted with oil companies to develop better lubricants. They tested different bearing materials, different clearances, different oil weights. It was an all-out engineering assault. And by late 1962, the 406 was no longer fragile. It was terrifying. In 1963, everything came together. Ford's 406-powered cars started dominating major events. At the Daytona 500 that year, Ford drivers were at the front of the pack. Consistently, lap after lap. Top speeds climbed, reliability improved. Cars that used to fade after 100 laps were now running strong at 200, 300. And suddenly, the balance of power shifted. Chevrolet's 409 was still strong, but it couldn't quite match the 406's combination of torque and mid-range punch. Chrysler's Max Wedge engines were powerful, but heavier, more aggressive, and sometimes harder to manage over long races. The 406 hit a sweet spot. It was brutal, but controllable, powerful, but now reliable enough to finish races. And that combination? That's what scared Detroit. Because Ford had figured something out. They weren't just chasing horsepower anymore. They were engineering complete race engines, systems that worked together. Power and reliability, speed and survival. And the 406 was proof of that shift. A turning point in Ford's engineering philosophy. But here's the twist. Just as the 406 reached its peak, Ford was already working on something even bigger. something more powerful, something that would make the 406 look like a stepping stone, the 427. You see, the 406 had pushed the FE block to its limits. That 4.13-inch bore, it was already near the edge of what the casting could handle. Go bigger, and you risk cracking cylinder walls. Thermal expansion becomes a nightmare. Head gasket failures become common, but Ford wanted more displacement, more airflow, more power, because they'd learned something critical. Displacement wins races, so they redesigned the block. Thicker walls, revised oiling, stronger internals, everything the 406 had struggled with. The 427 would solve. They took every lesson, every failure, every hard-won improvement, and built it into the next generation. And once the 427 arrived in 1963, the 406's time was up. Production of the 406 High Performance was short-lived, roughly 1962 to early 1963. That's it. Maybe a year and a half of actual production. Only a limited number of engines were built, mostly for performance cars like the Galaxy and for racing teams. It didn't last long, but it didn't need to, because its impact was already locked in. The 406 forced Ford to confront its weaknesses. It exposed flaws in oiling, durability, and high RPM performance, things they could ignore in truck engines and family sedans, but not in racing, never in racing, and more importantly, it led directly to one of the greatest racing engines ever built. Without the 406, there is no 427 side oiler, no Le Mans dominance, no GT40 victories, no Ford revolution in endurance racing. The lessons learned from 406 failures directly informed the 427's design. The oiling system that became legendary in the side oiler, born from 406 disasters. The strengthened bottom end that let the 427 survive 24-hour races, developed because the 406 couldn't. Every improvement was earned in failure. And yet, today, most people barely remember it, overshadowed by the engines that came after, forgotten in the shadow of legends. When people talk about Ford big blocks, they mention the 427, the 428 Cobra Jet, maybe the 429, but the 406? It's a footnote, a transition engine, something that existed between the engines that mattered, but make no mistake, for a brief moment in the early 1960s, the 406 High Performance was the engine Detroit feared, because it showed what Ford was capable of. Not just brute force, but evolution. The willingness to fail, learn, and improve, to push until something breaks, and then fix what broke. That's racing, that's engineering, and the 406 embodied both. In the end, the 406 wasn't perfect. It had flaws. It failed. It broke under pressure. It embarrassed Ford on national television. It cost them races they should have won, but that's exactly what made it important, because every failure taught Ford something. Every broken bearing, every seized crank, every engine that died on the banking at Daytona pushed them closer to greatness, made them better, made them hungrier. And that's the real story. The 406 didn't just win races, it built the foundation for everything that came next. For a decade of Ford dominance, for victories at Le Mans that changed motorsports history, for engines that became legends. So the next time you hear about the 427, remember what came before it. Remember the engine that almost tore itself apart trying to win. The engine that failed publicly and painfully. The engine that forced Ford to become better. And in doing so, changed everything. Because that's how legends are really built, not in moments of triumph, but in the brutal lessons of failure. The 406 High Performance was Ford's education. Expensive, painful, public, but absolutely necessary. And every victory that came after, every championship, every record, every legendary win, they all started here in the early days of 1962. When an engine came to life and scared the hell out of Detroit. If you enjoyed this story, let me know what you want to see next. Another forgotten engine, a legendary rivalry, or a deep dive into the machines that shaped automotive history. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might be even crazier.